Today we have the Governor of California, Gavin Newsom. Thanks so much for coming on.
It's great to be with you.
So I want to start with this because I think it's the most important question right now. What is at stake with this recall election? What would it mean if a Republican governor took over?
I think it's pretty profound. I think particularly on the issue that defines so many other issues right now, and that's our need to focus on this Delta variant and the mutation and the challenges associated with getting our kids safely back into school and continuing our economic recovery. And that's around masking and vaccine verifications. And I think on just those two issues, I hope people realize the consequential nature of who's sitting in the proverbial, what we call horseshoe in the governor's office, the ability with simple signature, pen to paper, an executive order to overturn the mask mandates in the public schools, to overturn the healthcare worker vaccine mandates. It will have profound consequences to the health, and I would argue the economy of the state. And that's a pledge from the leading candidates on the other side. It is not hyperbole to suggest that the consequences of a yes, not a no on this recall can be profound and pronounced on the issue that defines, again, so much of our consciousness as a nation, not just as a state.
Healthcare implications aside, what about the political implications, beyond just this pandemic in and of itself?
Well, I mean, if you're Kevin McCarthy, you'd be celebrating it. Probably be there, sitting there, swearing in of the next governor, and the impact and momentum that would have in the 2022 midterms. I mean, if you're Chuck Schumer, I mean, just think about who Kamala Harris would have been replaced with if Larry Elder were governor of California. It wouldn't have been Alex
Yeah.
Padilla. Wouldn't be a 50-50 Senate. If you're Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, look at the entire Biden-Harris agenda. Just consider the $3.5 trillion package everybody's debating right now, particularly over the course of the last 24 hours. What are the top lines in there? It's around the care economy. It's around childcare. It's around preschool for all, free community college. Check, check, check. California's done all those things. In many ways, it replicates the California agenda. That quite literally is on the ballot September 14th as well. I think it'd have tectonic, I mean this, tectonic implications. We're so focused, and I get it, on the mayor's race and what does that mean in terms of defund police, and so focused on Georgia and the next iteration of the Georgia race, Herschel Walker, who's up or down as it relates to gubernatorial aspirants. But California is the fifth largest economy in the world, a big blue state where Nancy Pelosi lives, where Kamala Harris lived before she became vice president, where Kevin McCarthy lived. And you consider all of that, I think the national implications are pretty profound.
Now, in your experience, what's been the one thing that's made people recognize the most how important it is to keep California in Democratic hands? Maybe something that they didn't recognize prior to this election, progressing forward.
I mean, I think honestly, what's been sharpened, the edges of focus have been sharpened in the last 5 or 6 months with this Delta variant. I mean, I think you see quite vividly the consequential nature of these decisions when you compare and contrast large states. It's hard to compare every state. California is the size of 21 states population combined. I mean, it's just a whole nother thing. That said, the states that often we get compared with, states like Florida and Texas, just look at their policies on this pandemic and look at what's happening out there. I mean, when you have water systems saying, don't use water so we can save oxygen, so we have a capacity in our hospitals and ICUs to address this new COVID surge. Look at the positivity rate in those states. Look at the hospitalizations in the ICUs in those states. Look at their mask mandates. Look what the governor's doing to overrun those local decision makers and decisions that can be made by health professionals with respect, a lot of political reasons. I'm being generous by saying with respect for a lot of political considerations. It's pretty obvious what those are for those folks. I think the consequences in that respect are pronounced, but also on the issue of climate. I mean, think about this. The smash mouth realities of climate change are here. If you don't believe in science, believe your own eyes. Not just with wildfires, but these heat domes, record-breaking July in terms of temperature, record-breaking drought conditions in the entire West Coast of the United States. Just think about these folks on the other side of this recall, the leading candidate who thinks it's a myth, a hoax, a crock to be exact, climate change, and wants more offshore oil drilling. And I know people say, well, you got a Democratic legislature, not all that can be advanced, but a lot of damage can be done with the line item veto, the judges you can appoint as governor, The fact you can file amicus briefs, just think about choice. This is an issue we're not talking enough about in this country. It's 25, 6, don't quote me, states, governors that are leading the charge to deny women's reproductive freedoms and rights. With the US Supreme Court, you can have a 27th, the state of California's governor join an amicus brief because he doesn't believe in women's right to choose. So this is consequential. It is existential from my humble perspective as a Democrat that loves this state and so much of the progress we've made. And really, at the end of the day, I hope people really take to heart the importance of at least turning in their ballot. We make it as easy as possible. It's not even showing up to the ballot box. It's turning in your ballot, which is an all mail-in now.
Building on that, of course, we all wish her the best of health, but the fact remains too that we have an 88-year-old senator from California. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, look, one of my oldest, I got into politics. I'm a San Francisco native. My kids, 5th generation San Franciscans. You don't grow up in San Francisco. Former supervisor, former mayor, Dianne Feinstein, so much of the history, Harvey Milk and the assassination of our old family friend, George Moscone. His kids are still very close to me and my family today. So much of our history is wrapped up in that history that is Dianne Feinstein, now Senator Feinstein. But you're absolutely right in terms of the consequential nature. If she decides, for example, to step down, and that is an appointee of the next governor of California or the current governor of California. And again, the national implications are overwhelming. And I know there's, again, this sort of false sense, well, it's California, big blue state. Why are you worried about it? I had some friends, I'm not making this up. Literally, it was a couple months ago, said, it was a Sunday and it was an extended family member said, why aren't you at the birthday party with everyone? I said, because I'm campaigning down south. And they said, what are you worried about? I said, what am I worried about? Democrats, including family members, are not even focused on this. Republicans, they're all focused on it. And that gap, that I don't even call it an enthusiasm gap, it's really an awareness gap of the consequences. We've got to close that between now and September 14th.
Now, we spend a lot of time focusing on how bad the Republican Party would be for California, and rightfully so, I think, because that party has proven just how dangerous it is. But I still think it's important to give people something to vote for. So why should people vote for you?
Well, I'm really proud of this state. Not only do we have better health outcomes in the United States as a whole through this pandemic, as well as better outcomes in states like Indiana, Florida, and Texas in terms of health outcomes related, but we had better economic outcomes. California's economy over the last 5 years, this is something the GOP loves to celebrate, and that's GDP. And over the last 5 years, California's growth rate is faster than any Western democracy on the planet. We've outperformed the United States. We've outperformed the UK, Germany, and Japan. We've significantly outperformed places like Texas and Florida. We're the tentpole of the American economy as we speak. Almost 700,000 jobs have come out of the state of California in the last 6 months. 100 plus IPOs. We're leading the nation in household income growth. We're seeing tremendous investment here, unprecedented investment in innovation, venture capital, record-breaking last year. We have the fastest growing state over the last 5 years in factory jobs, 13% GDP growth in just factory jobs, number one in two-way trade. I mean, this state's innovation, entrepreneurialism is alive and well. And I know there's some anxiety around a few companies leaving, but there's hundreds of companies that are startups that are breaking through, changing the world that we know. And I'm also proud of the fact we're America's coming attraction, the most diverse state in the world's most diverse democracy. And we expanded healthcare, we expanded childcare, we've expanded policies that have been exported all across the country. And this state's led in terms of low carbon green growth and the work we're doing to detoxify our air and water. The president of the United States had a big press conference seems like a year ago, but it was just a few weeks ago with the automobile manufacturers. That wasn't possible without the deal we made with the 5 largest automobile companies led by Ford a year ago as we pushed back against Trump in his efforts to curtail our emission standards. That's one of the most significant environmental achievements in the last decade that the president advanced, but it wouldn't have happened without California. So I go across the spectrum: healthcare, social justice, economic justice, racial justice. We're shutting down 2 prisons. We ended the death penalty in the state of California. We're leading the nation in terms of transforming our public education system. Brand new grade we created, TK for all, 200,000 new childcare slots this year. We're doing college savings accounts, $2 billion. Every child that enters into kindergarten is going to own savings account. First state in American history to do it. We tripled our earned income tax credit, $12 billion tax rebate that we're giving out quite literally in the next couple of weeks, $12 billion, the highest reserves in state's history. More engineers, scientists, more researchers, more Nobel laureates in the state than any other state in America, the finest university system, free community college, did that 2 years ago. Really proud of this state. There's so much to look forward to. And we got to address the issue of homelessness. That's my top priority, $12 billion investment into mental health, housing, and in converting hotels and motels. I've been out there cleaning up encampments myself. I see what you see. The affordability crisis in the state, unprecedented commitment and plan on housing affordability. And we're just getting started. It's been 2.5 years. I mean, I know it feels like 2 decades. I've been governor. It's only 2.5 years. Yeah. And this last 18 months has been consequential, but we're just getting going. And so I really feel confident and incredibly proud of the resiliency of the state, but I know the recovery is uneven, and I know we're struggling to do everything in our power to help communities that have been ravaged by this pandemic. And that's the responsibility I as governor, I feel deeply. And I want folks to know, I see and I hear people, and I want them to know that we have work to do, but I have your back.
You touched upon this with, figuring out the homeless situation, but what are your priorities, at least for the next year?
We're hitting the ground running. We just put out this $12 billion plan, $3 billion plan just for conservatorship housing, for mental health, for Laura's Law placements. An actual strategy, $5.8 billion for something called Home Key. It's now a national model. We were able to get 6,000 new homeless housing, unprecedented in American history. We were able to do that in 5.5 months with $846 million last year. Think about what we could do with $6 billion in the next year. Actual strategies, actual plans, an encampment plan, first in state history. Strategy to clean up the streets, $1 billion called Clean California. That's why I'm out there. You'll see me out there. Trust me, it hasn't even been a campaign thing. It's like I'm just going back to my mayoral roots, clean up the damn streets. And we're doing that at a scale in the state. The healthcare work. I mean, no other state's doing what we're doing on healthcare. Expanding, including regardless of your pre-existing disability pay and your immigration status. And don't think for a second that's not why this recall's on the ballot. Remember, the guy behind this recall, the guy who's in the voting pamphlet, the CEO of this recall, said he was inspired. The 6th recall effort since I started was inspired because I stood up against Trump in the deportation policy. He was inspired because he was offended that we expanded healthcare to undocumented children 0 to 26, or at least 19 to 26-year-olds. I was proud of that. And we just doubled down by doing it for 50-year-olds and older, and also giving them long-term care. There are 2.2 million undocumented residents in the state. 68% have been here for over 10 years. These are the folks that had our backs during this pandemic. They give $3 billion a year in taxes. And I'm just sick of these people demagoguing the Latino community, demagoguing and looking down and talking down to our diverse communities. I mean, this is a very consequential race. And this guy, Heatley, who is that CEO, wants to microchip 27% of Californians because he wants to microchip all immigrants. 27% of the state is foreign born. And he says he wants to microchip immigrants because it works for animal control. I mean, this is serious stuff. Yeah. Trumpism is still alive and well in this country. We defeated Trump, but we haven't defeated Trumpism. And I want folks to know that's what's really behind this recall. And that's why we have to reject it and vote no.
Now, your campaign's been saying to vote no for the first question and to leave the second question blank. But hypothetically speaking, in the event that the recall were to go forward, wouldn't leaving that second question blank basically forfeit the selection of governor to just the most far-right Republicans, who would vote for someone like Larry Elder, for example?
Well, I don't know what other brand there is except far-right. Every single one of these Republicans voted for Trump. Every single one of these Republicans wants to eliminate the mask mandate and verification on vaccines. I mean, I mean, by definition. So, Larry Elder, of course, he's a guy who wants to also eliminate the corporate tax, eliminate the minimum wage. He wants to eliminate Social Security by privatizing. He wants to increase offshore oil drilling. He doesn't believe in the FDA. He wants to eliminate federal funding for housing and education. Doesn't believe women are as smart as men. He actually wrote an op-ed on that. Doesn't believe women have the right to choose. I mean, this guy's to the right of Trump. Yeah. Wants to cut Medicare, wants to cut Medicaid. Doesn't believe in Obamacare. Let the market decide. You can't make this stuff up. Yeah. In addition to, obviously, climate change is a myth. So look, we've got to defeat this recall. It's a simple message. No and go. Go to the mailbox. Turn in. Don't even turn out on Election Day. Election Day is today. Yeah. Every day between now, it ends. Election Day ends on September 14th. But if we turn in the votes, the ballots, we don't have to ever worry about that second question. We don't have to ever worry about Larry Elder getting sworn in with Donald Trump zooming in, or Kevin McCarthy standing by him, or sitting people like Newt Gingrich and Mike Huckabee, who's one of the most enthusiastic backers of this effort, or Nunes, or any of these guys. This is serious. They're coming. They're coming after our voting rights. This is all part of the big lie. I mean, this is a serious moment in American history. We're debating democracy. We have guys out there on one of those damn networks in Hungary with, authoritarians. I mean, this is a serious moment. And I never thought I'd be this intense about this, because I thought, all right, well, this too shall pass. I'm married in a Republican family. It's not about my distaste or disdain for people to disagree with, but there's something that's happened to the Republican Party. And they're captured by this extremism that is totally present in this recall campaign. And I hope people really, really do pay attention to what's at stake. And next year, we'll have a normal election. Next year, we can debate the merits and demerits of our approach on homelessness and housing and compare and contrast with all the other candidates. But right now, we've got to stop this, I think, profound train wreck by voting no on this recall.
Now, the last year has shown, just how important the position of governor is, as we navigate our way through this pandemic, for example. And you spoke about this before when you were talking earlier about Texas and Florida. But with those states in particular, how would you compare your performance to that of people like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott as far as, these last few weeks have been concerned?
I mean, facts speak for themselves. Yesterday we had a 5.2% positivity rate, Florida, and in Texas, I think Texas was north of 20%. They're record-breaking hospitalizations. They were bringing in, you saw the national headlines, they were bringing in mobile morgue units down to Texas. They were helping with ventilators in Florida. I mean, we had an $80 billion operating surplus this year. I mean, they don't even know they don't even understand that in Florida and Texas. $80 billion operating surplus, record reserves. You've seen the economic growth. You've seen the energy, the vibrancy that's starting to return. Again, not equally, and we've got to own that. It's growth and inclusion. But the fact that we have a strategy of equity and inclusion, that's part of our DNA, something that makes me proud of California and this state. So we have better health outcomes throughout this pandemic, better economic outcomes. And our policies lead the nation. They lead the world. Future happens here first, across the spectrum. Think of social justice, racial justice, economic justice. Look at where the policy emanates. Look where it comes from. It comes from the great state of California. And so I don't, with respect, I don't even like being in the same breath as their approach to policy making. And finally, just this, we're open argument, interest, and evidence. I'm not an ideologue. And there's humility here, man. This has been hard this last year and a half. And I have great respect for governors of all political stripes. None of us were given a playbook on this. Yeah. It's one thing to go back to clips in 1918, 1919. And all of us were iterating. And everybody's doing our best. And I'm not here to take cheap shots, but I am here to try to save lives and to deny the efficacy of wearing a face covering when every emergency room doctor's been doing it for decades. Offends me. To deny the efficacy of vaccines when, I think the first vaccine mandate came from our founding father, George Washington. Yeah. And they had no problem with all those mandates that they were requiring and thrusting on our kids to get into schools. All of a sudden, this vaccine is offensive. I mean, this is pure political hogwash. It's pure ideology and a party that's been taken over increasingly by conspiracy theorists and extremists. I mean, I don't know what happened. I mean, I sit every day in Ronald Reagan's old desk and old office. I don't know what happened to the good old days. I mean, Reagan's starting to look like the good old days to me, even though we're reinvesting in the cuts he made on mental health half century ago, and finally making historic investments this year to make up for that.
And what's especially ironic about, the health outcomes that we're seeing is, like, in places like Florida and Texas, we're seeing worse health outcomes now with a vaccine free and readily available than we did even before there was a vaccine that even existed. And that's just a testament to, like, the lack thereof in terms of leadership that we're seeing out of these certain states where, they focus more on culture war issues and, getting their cable news hits.
Right? I mean, it's just, if it's not that, it's something else. These guys chin up all this nonsense. And it's really nonsense. We got to blow back. Look, we stood tall against Trump and Trumpism. No state. We had over 100 lawsuits. We won them. We were firm. We had conviction. Been a lot of headwinds in California the last couple of years. I mean, we're dealing with record drought. We're dealing with record fires. We got social justice issues in the most diverse state in America. But we're also, we're resilient. We're tough. We're gritty. We're leading, and including on vaccines. We're top 10 across the spectrum in eligible people getting vaccinated, adults getting vaccinated. Now it's over 80%, at least one dose. I'm really proud of that. Among the lowest positivity rates in the country, despite the Delta variant, because we're open argument, interested in evidence, science, and iterative, right? I mean, something doesn't work, we'll own it. But you know what? We're not willing to take a back seat to lead. We led with the first stay-at-home order. That, trust me, that wasn't popular back then. People were angry, but it allowed other states a little bit of room. New York, others started to move in that direction. I think that saved lives. We led as the first state to require all state workers to get vaccinated. First state to require all healthcare workers, mandating them to get vaccinated. First state to require all school staff to do the same. That's all just in the last few weeks. So we're not backing off our responsibility to save lives and to lean in this pandemic. But again, you asked that compare and contrast. There are these red states that are just in a different planet as it comes to the issue of this pandemic. And it's driven purely by increasingly presidential and primary politics.
Now, I want to finish off with this, and that is, how have you held up during this time? Because every governor, like you had just mentioned, had to deal with COVID. Every governor had to iterate and figure out, like, what works best for his or her state. But, for every other governor didn't have to deal with a recall election on top of that. So, I can't imagine that this has been a walk in the park for you over these last several months.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like that old line Bill Clinton said, no one cares about my yesterdays, they only care about their tomorrows.
Yeah.
And that honestly is my response. I get it. I mean, God, I get it. Politicians, right? We love to hate. And they're just things. They're not even human beings. Thank you for asking. Honestly, thanks for asking a question about as a human being, not just as a governor. Because I wasn't born a governor. I was born a human being, a single mom, was a teenage mom who raised me on her own just a couple years later. We had a foster brother. Man, we grind. I mean, I was working Jeff Hicks Construction. I was a janitor. I mean, look, that's who I am. That's who I am. That's the essence. I'm a dad. I got 4 kids. Oldest is about to turn 12. And you know what? She's so excited for one thing, not for some new iPod, but to get vaccinated. I got a 5-year-old. That's the cutest damn thing in the world. And, only wants to do is get a crew cut. And I just love his long hair, man. I mean, it's hard. That part is the hardest part, being a good dad and showing up and being there and address, look, man, I get it. The homeless issues, the affordability. I get why people are frustrated. I get why people that supported me are frustrated. I get why, we're at this point, not just with this recall, but in this country. It's been hard the last 18 months on all of us. And if you think it hasn't been hard on you, whoever you are, it has been in ways seen and unseen. And I just think we need to be there for each other. We need to get past the partisan recall and start focusing on how we can knit this state back together. I have 40 million people I feel deep responsibility for. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. I don't care if you live in urban or rural parts of the state, man. We have your back, care about you, because you care about your family, you care about your community. We're all in this damn thing together. But this partisan recall, this is existential, and we got to beat it back, and we got to just raise awareness. Just 20 days to go.
Well said. We'll leave it there. I've got my ballot right here that I just filled out, so I'll be heading to the drop box in the next day or so, and just keep powering through, and good luck, and we'll just make sure everybody votes no.
I love it. I appreciate you, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thanks so much.